The crimson sky wept torrents of rain across the broken landscape of Kepler 442, turning the refugee trail into a treacherous river of mud and despair. Erin pressed her emerald green hands against her pack straps, her red curls plastered too, her skull by the relentless downpour. Each step forward was a battle against the sucking earth that seemed determined to claim every soul foolish enough to traverse its surface. The caravan stretched endlessly ahead and behind her, a serpentine, massive beings from a dozen worlds all fleeing the same cosmic horror that had torn their homes from the stars. Towering Vorthak with their crystalline exoskeletons chinked like broken glass with each labored step. Sleek Azurians glided on their membrane wings, staying just above the worst of the mire. And scattered throughout were her own people, the Verdani, marked by their distinctive green skin and flame-colored hair, a people the Galactic Council had long ago deemed expendable. Erin stumbled, catching herself on a gnarled root protruding from the bank. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, lungs burning from the toxic spores that drifted like deadly snow through the atmosphere. She'd been walking for 3 days straight, surviving on nothing but nutrient paste and the bitter water they could filter from the tainted streams. "Keep moving, Greenskin," growled a passing Corvin, his forearms making quick work of the terrain that left her struggling. "The storms get worse after dark." She wanted to respond to defend herself, but the words died in her throat. What was the point? The hierarchy was clear. Humans at the top for their ingenuity and compassion. Then the warrior races, the scholars, the merchants. The Verdani scraped along at the bottom, useful only for manual labor and dangerous tasks that others wouldn't risk. The ground beneath her feet felt different suddenly, softer, more yielding. She took another step and felt herself sink slightly. Panic fluttered in her chest like a caged bird. "Wait!" she called out, but her voice was lost in the howling, wind and the splash of hundreds of feet through the mire. Another step. This time she sank to her ankles. "Help!" she cried louder, but the caravan continued its relentless march. A few heads turned in her direction. A Vorthak's compound eyes reflected the lightning, and Azurian's elegant neck craned to look, but none stopped. In their expressions, she saw the same cold calculation. The time and energy required to help her wasn't worth the risk. The mud was at her knees now, thick and grasping like living quicksand. Her pack weighed her down, but she couldn't reach the straps to cut herself free. The more she struggled, the faster she sank. "Please." Her voice cracked with desperation. I can't get out." The last of the caravan's rear guard passed, her by. An elderly Corvin merchant looked back once, his expression almost apologetic, before turning away and disappearing into the curtain of rain. Erin was alone. The mud reached her waist, cold and suffocating. She could feel it seeping through her clothes, claiming her inch by inch. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks as she realized this was how she would die, not in the cosmic fires that had consumed her homeworld, but in the anonymous muck of an alien planet forgotten and unmourned. Through the rain, a figure emerged from the gloom like a ghost made solid. Tall, bipedal, with the distinctive silhouette she'd learned to recognize, human. But instead of the pristine environmental suits most humans wore, this one was as mud-splattered and bedraggled as any refugee. "Hold on," the figure called, and she heard the warm, melodious tones of the human language. "I'm coming." Without hesitation, the human, a male, she realized as he drew closer, waded directly into the treacherous ground. He moved with purpose, testing each step, a coil of polymer rope already in his hands. "My name is Elias," he said as he secured one end of the rope around his waist. "I'm going to get you out of there." She stared at him in disbelief. "But I'm just Verdani. Why would you?" "Because that's what humans do," he replied simply, throwing her the other end of the rope. "Now grab hold and don't let go." The medical tent flickered with the warm glow of battery-powered lanterns, a small sanctuary carved from the chaos of the storm-lashed refugee camp. Erin sat on a salvaged crate, her emerald skin still bearing traces of the dark mud that had nearly claimed her life. Her red curls now clean and drying, caught the light like burnished copper as Elias gently cleaned the scrapes on her arms. "This might sting a little," he warned, applying antiseptic to a particularly deep cut. His hands were steady, practiced. She could see the calluses of someone who'd spent years doing this kind of work. She winced but didn't pull away. "You've done this before." "More times than I'd like to count." His voice carried a weight that spoke of countless emergencies, endless suffering witnessed. "I've been with the Colonial Aid Network for 8 years now. Started right after the Proxima incident." Aaron knew about Proxima. Everyone did. An entire star system's worth of refugees, scattered across a dozen worlds when their sun went nova. But she'd never met someone who'd been there, who'd pulled people from burning ships and collapsing habitats. "My world was different," she said softly. Verdos Prime didn't explode, it just died. Slowly. The soil turned toxic, the water became poison. We had months to watch everything we loved wither away. Elias paused in his ministrations, meeting her eyes. In the lamplight, she could see they were brown. Warm brown like the rich earth of her homeworld before the blight came. "I'm sorry. That might have been worse in its way." She nodded, surprised by his understanding. Most species viewed the Verdani exodus as somehow less tragic because it had been gradual, predictable. They'd had time to prepare after all. But Elias seemed to grasp the special horror of watching your world die by degrees. "What was it like?" he asked, settling back on his own makeshift seat, a medical supply crate that served as both chair and storage. "Your world, I mean. Before." No one had ever asked her that. In 8 months of refugee processing, countless interviews and evaluations, every official had focused on the end. The toxicity levels, the evacuation logistics, the resettlement requirements. None had cared about what they'd lost. "Beautiful," she whispered, her voice catching. "We had gardens that floated in the air, suspended by magnetic fields. The trees grew in spirals, reaching toward our twin suns. And the music we could make, our hair resonate with different frequencies, create harmonies that would make the flowers bloom in patterns." As if responding to the memory, her curls seemed to shimmer slightly, a faint harmonic vibration barely audible in the tense confines. Elias leaned forward, genuinely fascinated. "That's incredible. Can you still do it?" "A little." She concentrated, and her hair produced a soft, crystalline note that seemed to make the very air glow warmer. "But it's not the same without the flowers to answer back." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sound of rain pattering against the tent's fabric. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the camp. Other refugees settling in for another miserable night, the occasional argument over sleeping space or rations, the wet coughing that had begun to plague those who'd been exposed to too many toxic worlds. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. "Humans, you could live anywhere, be anything. Your people practically run the galaxy. You could have comfort, safety. Instead, you're here in the mud with us." Elias was quiet for a long moment, cleaning, his hands with methodical precision. "I lost someone once," he said finally. "My sister. She was part of a deep space mining operation that went wrong. Equipment failure, reactor breach. When the rescue ships arrived, the corporation's people saved their own first. The expendable workers were left for last." Aaron felt something cold settle in her stomach. She didn't make it. "No. And I realize that if we don't help each other, really help, not just the convenient cases or the politically useful ones, then we're all just waiting our turn to be expendable." He looked up at her, and she saw a fierce determination burning in those warm brown eyes. "Every person matters. Every life has value. That's not just human philosophy, that should be universal law." She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from pain, but from something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The others, they passed right by me. Some of them were Verdani, my own people. "Fear makes people cruel sometimes," Elias said gently. "But it doesn't have to. One act of kindness can ripple outward, change everything." As if summoned by his words, the tent flap rustled and opened. A young Azurian poked his elegant head inside, his silver-blue skin pale with exhaustion. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly, speaking in accented standard. "I saw what you did today, human. My clutch sister, she is injured. Would you look at her?" Elias was already reaching for his medical kit. "Of course, Aaron, do you feel strong enough to help? I could use an extra pair of hands." She stood without hesitation, surprised by the steadiness in her legs. Yes, I can help." As they prepared to leave the tent, Elias caught her hand. Gently. His skin was warm against her cooler green flesh, and she felt a small electric thrill at the contact. "Thank you," he said simply. "For trusting me, for staying." She squeezed his fingers, marveling at how natural the gesture felt despite their anatomical differences. "Thank you for seeing me as worth saving." Outside, the storm was beginning to break, and for the first time in months, Aaron glimpsed stars between the racing clouds. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue, and the refugee camp had transformed from a desperate huddle of survivors into something resembling a community. Makeshift shelters lined muddy pathways. Children of various species played elaborate games that transcended language barriers, and the evening air carried the mingled aromas of a dozen different worlds' cuisine, prepared over portable heating units. Aaron had become Elias's unofficial partner in the camp's medical station, a converted cargo container that now served as their primary clinic. She'd discovered a natural aptitude for xenobiology, her gentle touch and intuitive understanding of different species' needs, making her invaluable as they treated everything from Corvin shell rot to Azurian wing tears. "Hand me the neural stimulator," Elias said. His brow furrowed in concentration as he worked on a young Vorthak whose crystalline exoskeleton had cracked during the journey. "The small one, with the blue indicator." Aaron moved smoothly to comply, their coordination now seamless, after days of working together. She watched as he carefully calibrated the device, noting how his fingers, so different from her own, with their warm pink flesh and short, practical nails, moved with surgeon-like precision. "There," he said, stepping back as the crack began to seal itself. "That should hold until you can get proper treatment at the settlement. Keep it dry for the next few days." The young Vorthak's parents chittered their gratitude in their crystalline language, but Aaron caught the universal tones of relief and thankfulness. As they left, she began cleaning the instruments, acutely aware of Elias's presence beside her. "You're getting good at this," he said, watching her work. "Have you ever considered medical training? Real training, I mean." She paused, a bitter laugh escaping her. "Verdani don't get into medical programs. We're not considered intelligent enough for the sciences." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." The vehemence in his voice made her look up in surprise. "You diagnosed that Corvin's metabolic disorder yesterday before I even finished the scan, and your intuition with the children. I've seen trained pediatric specialists with less natural ability." Heat rose in her cheeks, turning her green skin a deeper shade. "You really think so?" "I know so." He moved closer and she caught his scent, clean sweat, antiseptic, and something uniquely him that made her pulse quicken. "When we reach the settlement, I'm going to recommend you for the Colonial Medical Corps Accelerated Program. If you want it." The idea was so foreign, so impossible, that for a moment she couldn't process it. Verdani became laborers, waste management technicians, low-level service workers. They didn't become doctors. She started, then found herself looking directly into his eyes. The warmth there, the absolute conviction that she was capable of more than her species' reputation suggested, made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with professional aspiration. "Think about it," he said softly, and his hand brushed hers as he reached for a supply kit. The contact sent electricity up her arm, and she saw his eyes widen slightly. He'd felt it too. For a moment they stood frozen, hands touching, the air between them charged with possibility. The tent flap burst open, admitting Kalen, an Azurian who'd become their most frequent patient coordinator. "We have incoming casualties," he announced, his melodious voice tight with urgency. Transport crash about 2 kilometers north, multiple species, serious injuries. The moment shattered, professional training taking over. Elias was already grabbing emergency supplies while Erin prepared stretchers and trauma equipment. But as they worked, she remained hyper-aware of every accidental touch, every shared glance. The casualties arrived in waves, a mixed group of refugees whose transport had skidded off the makeshift road into a ravine, burns, broken bones, internal injuries that required careful navigation of different physiologies. They worked for hours, Elias and Erin moving in perfect synchronization, their bond deepening with each life they saved together. It was nearly dawn when they treated the last patient, an elderly human woman whose only injury was a sprained wrist but who'd stayed to help others despite her age. "You two make quite a team," she said, her weathered face creasing in a knowing smile as Erin wrapped her wrist. "How long have you been married?" "We're not," Erin started, her face flushing dark green. "We're colleagues," Elias added quickly, but she noticed his ears had turned red. The woman's smile widened. "Of course you are, dear. My mistake." After she left, an awkward silence settled between them. They cleaned up mechanically, carefully avoiding eye contact, until finally Elias cleared his throat. "It's been a long night," he said. "Maybe we should get some rest." "Yes," she agreed quickly. "Rest, good idea." But neither moved toward the tent flaps. Instead, they found themselves sitting on opposite supply crates, the space between them feeling both vast and intimate. "Erin," Elias said finally, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Yes?" What she said, about us being a team, she wasn't entirely wrong, was she? Her heart hammered against her ribs. No, she wasn't wrong. He stood slowly, crossing the small distance between them. When he reached her, he held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. She looked at it for a long moment, thinking of all the reasons this was impossible. Their species were different. The social complications would be enormous. Humans were at the top of the galactic hierarchy while Verdani were barely tolerated. Then she placed her hand in his, and felt rightness settle over her like warm sunlight. "We're going to face challenges," he said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Yes, people will have opinions. Yes. It might be complicated." She stood, bringing them face to face, their joined hands between them. "Elias?" "Yes?" "I don't care." He smiled then, the expression transforming his tired face into something radiant. "Neither do I." When he leaned down to kiss her, she rose to meet him halfway, and discovered that some things were universal after all. The settlement sprawled across the plateau like a geometric fever dream, its prefabricated modules and atmospheric processors gleaming silver against the alien sunset. After 2 months of mud and makeshift shelters, the sight of permanent structures should have filled Erin with relief. Instead, as their transport convoy crested the final hill, she felt only a growing knot of dread in her stomach. "Integration Processing Station 7, announced the automated system in flat bureaucratic tones. "All refugees report to your designated species sectors for housing assignment and work allocation. Deviation from assigned sectors requires special dispensation from colonial administration." Elias squeezed her hand where they sat together in the back of the medical transport. Over the past month, their relationship had deepened beyond either of their expectations. They'd shared quiet moments between medical emergencies, stolen kisses, in the pre-dawn hours when the camp slept, and long conversations about everything from xenobiology to poetry. But now, facing the rigid structures of official settlement, the weight of reality pressed down on them. "Section H7 for Verdani residents," the announcement continued. "Sections A through C reserved for human personnel and essential services." Erin felt Elias stiffen beside her. The message was clear. She would be housed with her own species in what was essentially a segregated district, while he would be assigned to the human quarters on the opposite side of the settlement. Miles apart, different administrative zones, different social circles. "We'll figure it out," he murmured, but she could hear the uncertainty beneath his confident tone. The processing center was a maze of lines, forms, and officials who processed refugees with mechanical efficiency. Erin found herself swept into the Verdani queue while Elias was directed toward the human registration area. For the first time in weeks they were separated, and the distance felt like a chasm opening beneath her feet. "Next," barked the processing clerk, a harried-looking Corvin whose 4 arms moved across multiple datapads simultaneously. "Name and homeworld." "Erin Veltara, Verdos Prime," she replied, stepping forward. "Skills assessment indicates basic medical training," the clerk continued without looking up. "You'll be assigned to Sanitation Corps, Section H7, Housing Block 15, Unit 2847. Next." "Wait," Erin said, her voice sharper than intended. "I've been working as a medical assistant for the past 2 months. I have experience with Verdani. Are not qualified for medical positions above basic first aid," the clerk stated flatly. "Colonial Medical Corps requires certified training from approved institutions. Sanitation Corps offers excellent opportunities for advancement within appropriate parameters. Next." The dismissal stung worse than any physical blow. Behind her, she could hear other Verdani accepting their assignments without protest. Waste, management, heavy labor, food service. The jobs nobody else wanted, the ones that kept them invisible and safely categorized. She found Elias waiting outside the processing center, his face grim. "Housing assignment in Block A2, he said without preamble. "Administrative district. They want me to run the central medical facility." "Congratulations," she said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. "And me?" "Sanitation Corps, Section H7. His face went pale. "That's across the entire settlement. They're putting you in the industrial district. Where Verdani belong, apparently." She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe we were foolish to think, no. His voice cut through her despair like a blade. "Don't you dare, what we have is real, Erin. It's the most real thing in my life. But how can we make it work? You'll be treating human officials and their families in the medical center. I'll be cleaning waste treatment facilities on the other side of the settlement. Different worlds, Elias. Different lives." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the streams of refugees being sorted and directed to their designated areas. Finally he spoke. "There's something I haven't told you, about why I really do this work." She looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "My sister Maya, the one who died in the mining accident. We weren't just siblings, we were twins. Identical twins, genetically speaking." He took a shaky breath. "The only reason I survived and she didn't was random chance. I was on a different shift rotation that day. Pure luck. Elias. For years after, I struggled with survivor's guilt. Why me? Why did I get to live when she didn't? And I realized that the only way to honor her memory was to make sure that when people needed help, someone would be there, that no one would be left behind because of bureaucracy or prejudice or simple indifference." He turned to face her fully, his brown eyes intense with conviction. "I can't change the system overnight, but I can make choices that matter. We can make choices that matter." Before she could ask what he meant, a familiar voice called out behind them, "Elias, there you are." A woman approached, tall, blonde, wearing the crisp uniform of Colonial Administration. "Dr. Helena Voss, Chief Medical Officer for this sector. We spoke via subspace about your assignment." Erin instinctively stepped back, but Elias moved closer to her instead. "Dr. Voss," he said formally, "I'd like you to meet Erin Veltara, my medical partner and the most naturally gifted diagnostician I've worked with in 8 years of emergency medicine." Dr. Voss's eyebrows rose as she took in Erin's green skin and the clear implication of Elias's words. "I see. Well, I'm sure she'll find the sanitation work quite fulfilling." "Actually," Elias said, his voice taking on a steel edge, "I'm declining the chief medical officer position." Both women stared at him in shock. "Elias," Dr. Voss said carefully, "this is a career-defining opportunity. The prestige, the salary, the research possibilities are meaningless if I can't work with the person who makes me a better doctor. He looked at Erin, and she saw her own feelings reflected in his eyes: love, determination, and a shared willingness to fight for what mattered. I'm requesting assignment to the general clinic that serves all sectors, and I want Erin as my senior medical assistant. That's highly irregular, Dr. Voss protested. The Colonial Medical Corps has strict protocols. Then maybe it's time those protocols evolved, Elias said quietly. Medicine is about helping people, Dr. Voss. All people. If the Corps can't accept that, then perhaps I'm not the right fit after all. Erin felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming gratitude and love. He was willing to sacrifice everything for her, for them, for the principle that love and partnership could transcend artificial barriers. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Yes, I do, he replied, taking her hand in full view of the administrator. Because this is what love means. We face the challenges together, or not at all. Dr. Voss looked between them for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. I'll need to make some calls. The Intersector Medical Clinic is understaffed anyway, and if you're willing to work for half the salary... She shook her head. Love makes people do the strangest things. As she walked away, muttering about paperwork and precedents, Elias pulled Erin into his arms. Are you sure? She asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, he replied, holding her tight. We're going to build something new here, Erin. Something better. Looking around at the settlement, with its rigid lines and segregated sectors, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could. 6 months later, the Intersector Medical Clinic had become the heart of something unprecedented in Settlement Station 7. What had started as a small facility serving the overflow from the main medical center had evolved into a beacon of integrated healthcare that drew patients from every corner of the colony. Erin stood in the main treatment bay, her red curls now adorned with the small silver pins that marked her as a certified medical technician, the first Verdani in colonial history to achieve the designation. She was suturing a complex laceration on a Corvin worker when she heard familiar footsteps behind her. How's our patient doing? Elias asked, setting down a tray of instruments she'd requested. The wound is healing well, she replied, speaking in the Corvin's native tongue. The patient's compound eyes brightened with surprise. Few non-Corvins bothered to learn their language. The synthetic muscle weave should integrate with your natural tissue within 3 days. You understand my words? The Corvin clicked excitedly. This is most unusual. We believe healthcare is most effective when provided in the patient's native language, Elias explained, also switching to fluent Corvin. Dr. Veltara here speaks 7 languages and is teaching the rest of our staff. Erin's heart still fluttered when he used her new title. After months of bureaucratic battles, late-night study sessions, and practical examinations that pushed her to her limits, she'd finally achieved full recognition as a medical doctor. The graduation ceremony had been small, just their clinic, staff, and a handful of administrative officials, but when they'd placed the ceremonial stethoscope around her neck, she'd felt like she could touch the stars. Dr. Veltara, the Corvin repeated reverently. I will tell my clutchmates of this. A greenskin who speaks as learned ones do. After the patient left, Erin and Elias worked side by side in comfortable synchronization, preparing for the evening rush. The clinic now operated around the clock, staffed by an increasingly diverse team of medical professionals who'd chosen to work there, despite the lower pay and unconventional approach. The Colonial Medical Board's inspection is tomorrow, Elias mentioned as he restocked supply cabinets. Nervous? She asked, though she already knew the answer. They'd been preparing for weeks, documenting their patient outcomes, mortality rates, and satisfaction scores. The numbers were impressive. Their integrated approach had resulted in better health outcomes across all species groups. Not nervous, he said, pausing to look at her. Hopeful, if they approve our methods for system-wide implementation. It changes everything, she finished. No more segregated health care, No more species-based treatment protocols. Through the clinic's large windows, they could see the settlement as it existed now, still organized in sectors, but with much more fluid movement between them. The success of their clinic had inspired other integration initiatives. Mixed species work crews were becoming common. The evening markets featured fusion cuisine that blended culinary traditions from a dozen worlds. Children played together in polyglot groups that switched languages as easily as games. As the sun set over the plateau, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold that reminded Erin achingly of her lost homeworld, Elias moved to stand behind her. His arms circled her waist and she leaned back against his warmth. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up the prestigious position, dealing with all the administrative headaches, the constant fights for funding?" "Never," he replied without hesitation. "Do you regret leaving sanitation work to become the galaxy's most controversial doctor?" She laughed, turning in his arms to face him. "Never. Though I do miss the simplicity sometimes." "Simple is overrated," he murmured, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Besides, we're just getting started." As if summoned by his words, the clinic's communication system chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display materialized between them, showing the face of Dr. Helena Voss, now Colonial Health Administrator for the entire sector. "Elias, Erin," she said, her expression unreadable. "The inspection results are in." They held their breath. "Congratulations," Dr. Voss continued, a smile breaking across her face. "The Colonial Medical Board has approved your integrated care model for implementation across all settlements in the sector. Furthermore, they're recommending Dr. Velterra's multilingual medical protocol for adoption system-wide." Erin felt her knees go weak. System-wide adoption meant their approach would be used on hundreds of worlds, helping millions of refugees and colonists. "There's more," Dr. Voss continued. "The Galactic Medical Council has extended an invitation for both of you to present your research at the annual conference on Proxima Station. It seems you've attracted attention at the highest levels." When the message ended, they stood in stunned silence for a moment. Then Elias let out a whoop of joy, sweeping Erin off her feet and spinning her around the clinic. "We did it," he laughed, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "We actually did it." "We changed the system," she agreed, her voice filled with wonder. "Just like you said we would." Later that evening, after the last patient had been treated and the clinic secured for the night, they walked hand in hand through the settlement's main plaza. The area buzzed with activity. Families of various species sharing evening meals, teenagers from different worlds attempting to teach each other their traditional dances, elderly beings of all kinds gathered around holographic displays showing news from across the galaxy. At the center of the plaza stood a new monument, a simple obelisk with a plaque that read, "In memory of all those lost among the stars, and in hope for all those yet to be found. May we never pass by those who need our help." It had been Erin's idea, though she'd never expected the Settlement Council to approve it. Now it served as a gathering place, a reminder of their shared humanity regardless of species. "Look," Elias said, pointing to a bench near the monument where a young human child was teaching an elderly Vorthak to play a hand-clapping game. The crystalline being's attempts at clapping were clumsy but enthusiastic, and both participants were laughing. "That's what we're really building," Erin observed. "Not just medical protocols or administrative policies. We're building a future where that scene is normal. Where love doesn't have to fight for the right to exist," Elias agreed. They found their own bench and settled together, watching the easy mingling of species that would have been impossible just months earlier. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, but for the first time since leaving her dying homeworld, Erin felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "So what's next?" she asked, her head resting on Elias's shoulder. "Tomorrow, we present our case to the medical council," he said. "Next month, we start training the next generation of integrated care teams. Next year..." He paused, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Next year, maybe we make this official." She raised an eyebrow. Are you proposing to me, Dr. Chen? Maybe I am, Dr. Veltara. Is that a problem? Only if you expect me to take your name, she teased. I've worked too hard for my own. I wouldn't dream of it. Though hyphenated names might get complicated on the forms. They dissolved into laughter, the sound joining the symphony of voices that filled the plaza. Dozens of languages, hundreds of stories, all weaving together into something greater than the sum of their parts. In the distance, another transport was arriving, carrying new refugees from some fresh catastrophe among the stars. Tomorrow there would be new patients to treat, new barriers to break down, new lives to save. But tonight, under the alien stars of their adopted world, Dr. Elias Chen and Dr. Aaron Veltara held each other close and dreamed of the future they were building together. One patient, one act of kindness, one moment of love at a time. Their story had begun with a rescue in the mud, but it would ripple outward across the galaxy, proving that sometimes the most profound changes start with the simplest truth, that every being deserves to be seen, to be helped, to be loved, regardless of the color of their skin or the world of their birth. And in a universe often cold and unforgiving, that was a revolution worth fighting for.